So if you're a newbie and you're like, Hoan, how do I do that without reputation? And how do I do that without experience? How do I do all that kind of stuff? Do what you can. Okay. Do what you can. And what does that mean? Well, maybe you go out and you learn from this podcast and you're like, wow, I learned a lot from Hoan. And then you go on my YouTube channel and then you learn a whole bunch of stuff. And then what you do is you share all of the things that you've been learning and you do this week after week after week. And you go, hey, I learned about debt service coverage ratio. Hey, I learned about apartment investing. Hey, I learned about fix and flips, Airbnbs, whatever. And you just keep talking about it. The people who are working their 9 to 5, they're not in the industry. They don't know lingo and jargon and all that kind of stuff. And if you're the only one on their timeline who's saying it, then you're the guy. You're the guy. When they think real estate, they think Matt, they think Hoan, they think whoever, right? You're the guy because you're doing what you can. Don't let the things you haven't done or can't do stop you from doing what you can do.
Hoan, thank you for joining me for our Thought Leader Spotlight series. I'm your host over here, Matt Camp, head of partnerships at DealMachine, and on these we really shine a spotlight on industry experts like yourself. Really hearing your inspiring stories and help educate our audience on the lessons that you've learned over the years. So really excited to welcome on today Hoan Thai. You're a Philly-based real estate investor for the last 11 years. You've got quite a few focuses between cash flowing assets, real estate loans like hard money and cash out refis, education for all types of investors that you really help people escape their 9 to 5. And then you've got the Hoan Zone YouTube channel too, on business and investing. And then outside of all that as well, you do some infinite banking using whole life insurance. So have quite a few things to dig into today. Welcome on. Appreciate the time.
Hey, Matt, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm excited for this interview, actually.
Yeah, I had a great time. I know Matt Faircloth was a mutual friend who introduced us and had a really good time with him. So maybe can you talk a little bit more? I know I read about your bio a little bit and what you're up to, but can you talk a little bit more of how you got into real estate, 11 years ago, and would love to hear more about your journey.
Yeah, I'm sure like 90% of your interviews, they said they read Rich Dad Poor Dad and that was it, and they became a real estate investor, and that's kind of my story too, but a little bit different. Well, maybe not even a little different, but I got my degree in mechanical engineering and then I got my master's degree in financial engineering. So I was like well educated, had my career, and I hated every moment of it. And I just knew I needed to get out of here because I would look at my bosses and I would say, do I want to be there? Do I want to be there? Do I want to be there? And the answer was always no. So I would say to myself, well, Hoan, if the answer is no, then why are you still here, right? You have to figure out a way out. And even if I jump to another job, that's just going to be more of the same. So getting another job was not the solution. The solution was, Hoan, you better figure out a business so that you can pay your bills and do whatever it is that you want. So entrepreneurship was the way to go, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I created all kinds of businesses. I was like selling shirts and smoothies and this and all kinds of stuff, right? But it wasn't until Rich Dad Poor Dad that I learned about real estate investing, and that's when the light bulb went on. And the big thing was that there's a business plan around real estate. It shows you how you can get the funding for the deals. It shows you the exit strategies. It shows you all of the things. And real estate's built out for that. If you try to get a business loan, that's like super hard. Get an SBA loan or something like that. If you're trying to like, oh, I want to start a laundromat or whatever, right? It's like ridiculously hard. But with real estate, they're practically giving you money. They're like, oh yeah, here, you got real estate, here's money. So one of the hardest parts of any business, which is the money, is already solved, seemingly. And so, yeah, that's when I was like, okay, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, real estate investing, that's going to be my way out of here. So that's all I focused on until I was able to escape my 9 to 5.
Love it, man. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely, one, it's relatable for a lot of our audience, like you said. I mean, I think probably 50% of the people who are DealMachine customers, were inspired by that to begin with. But, as you kind of went through that journey as well, can you talk more about doing that first deal, overcoming that fear of like, escaping the 9 to 5? Like, I know that's something that a lot of our audience is probably on that tipping point of, hey, I want to make the jump, but, would love to hear your process there.
Yeah, so I was afraid of doing my first deal just like everybody else because it's the fear of the unknown. It's not that the actual thing was scary. It's just that I don't know what else to be afraid of. It's like, what else might kill me when I go out there and try it, right? So my first deal was actually a 6-unit apartment building. And most people are like, oh, how the hell do you start with that? Well, it turns out that a lot of my fears went away when I did math. So I did math and I figured out what the deal could make, and I also tried to kill the deal. I would stress test it. So there's three main numbers in terms of analyzing a deal, and I tested all of them. So number one, I tested the ARV. I said, okay, let's say I needed my ARV to be $300,000 for an example. Well, what happens if it's not 300 and it's 290 or 280 or 270 or 260? And I just kept chopping it down, right? And I would see where the deal would break. And then I would ask myself, okay, the deal breaks at say 250. Well, what is the likelihood that I'm going to be $50,000 off? Right? What is the likelihood that I'm going to be 20% off of my numbers or 35% off of my numbers or whatever it is, right? What's that likelihood? And so I was like, okay, the deal probably works. Okay, so now that's number one. That's the ARV check. My other check was my cash flow check. So I said, all right, I assume I'm going to rent out my units for at the time like 850, right? I said, okay, I'm going to rent out my units for 850. What happens if I don't? 825. Does the deal still work? Okay. What about 800? 775, 750, right? You see what I'm doing, right? I'm chopping it down. And then I go, okay, where does the deal die? And let's say it dies at 675. And then I go, okay, what's the likelihood that I'm going to need to chop my rent all the way down to 675 to get a tenant in there, right? And I was like, that's highly unlikely. Somebody's definitely going to rent it before that. Somebody's going to definitely rent it. If the market rent is 850, somebody's coming in at 775. To get to 675, that's like a really weird scenario. So I'm like, okay, for the most part, I think part two, check. All right, so third component, rehab. All right, I think the rehab is going to be $100,000. But what if it's 110, 120, 130, 140, 150, right? And I just kept going up. Where does the deal die? And then again, what's the likelihood of me being this wrong, right? What's the likelihood of me being this wrong? So the deal checked all the boxes. And I said, Hoan, if you don't sign and do this deal, that's because you're just being a little, like fill in the negative word or whatever, right? You're just being a little punk. So just do the deal because this is an irrational fear because you just solved all of your rational fears through logic. What you have here is an irrational one. So if you don't do it, it's just because you're being a punk. And I'm no punk. So I did the deal.
Yeah, love it, man. Just for the newbies too. And when you say like when the deal dies, can you get really specific on the metrics you're looking at, and what when like, hey, there's the tipping point?
Yeah. So let's do the cash flow. That one's the easy one, right? So you're going to have your debt. You're going to have your debt on your property, and you're going to have your expenses, right? There's going to be things that eat your money, right? And so you gotta bring in a certain amount of money before you have to bring in a certain amount of money in order to pay off the expenses and the debt and still cash flow, right? So I had like, I don't know, a metric of just like being positive. Now, to go deeper into it, there's a debt service coverage ratio, which is typically 1.25. It's too long to get into this episode, but you guys can Google it. If the debt service coverage ratio was 1.25, I just needed to make sure that my cash flow could satisfy that 1.25, right? As long as it could satisfy that 1.25, I was in good shape. So that was my cash flow check. In terms of the ARV, I needed to double check that when I refinanced my property, that I was going to get all of my money back out. And if I didn't get all of my money back out from the refinance, then the other thing that I wanted to check on was that the money that I had trapped in the deal after my refinance, that I would get all of that back through cash flow within the year. So these are kind of weird metrics that maybe people use, maybe they don't, but that's what I had at the time. So those were the two real main things. Was I cash flowing? Could I hit my debt service coverage ratio? And could I pull all or most of my money back out when I refinance, doing the BRRRR strategy essentially? Could I pull that all of my money back out? And if I didn't, could I get my money back out within the year from cash flow? So kind of wacky little things, but hey, it works. It works.
Yeah. Love it. If you were restarting this today and you were going into it with this market of, it depends on where you're at locally, right? On if you've been affected, and how much, or really there's just a lot of uncertainty out there as well. How would you approach it differently if you would, or how for somebody jumping in for that first deal today? Is there anything you would change, or any tips there?
No, I think those rules, what I just talked about, are more important than ever, right? If actually, I would even be more extreme because we've been at the height for a long time, and ARVs can take a dive pretty quickly. Rents could take a dive pretty quickly because everything's at the high point, right? So, if anything, what I just described to you should be applied even more so, more conservatively. The When I said that when I refinanced out, I wanted all my money back or get my money back within the year. Like maybe your rule should be I got to get all my money back plus some. Like that might be the rule. The other one might be in terms of debt service coverage ratio. Instead of hitting a 1.25, maybe you hit a 1.3 just for your own safety measures, right? As an example. As an example. Now, the tough part is a lot of deals won't pencil out when you do it that way. But what I will say is if a deal does pencil out, then you do everything in your power to get that deal, right? Because that one is a diamond in the rough. Now, other ways you can still do deals to make them pencil out is by having money trapped in the deal, but having money trapped in the deal that's not your money. Have people who have money have their money trapped in the deal. So maybe like Matt, you and I, we're partners and we do a deal, but you bring say $50,000 to the deal and we do this BRRRR scenario, 6-unit apartment building. And let's say that after we refinance, we're going to have $50,000 trapped in. Well, it's going to be your $50,000 trapped in and you're okay with that, right? And so from my vantage point, from my stance, I have no money trapped in the deal. I'm going to still operate the thing, but you have your money. And also because you have $50,000 trapped in the deal, our debt doesn't need to be as high. And because our debt's not as high, our debt service coverage ratio is going to be easier to hit. Where it's going to be way easier to hit that 1.25 or that new 1.3 that we just made up on the spot right now. Right. So that's a way to do it, to be safer, to have people with money in the deal, because this way you won't have to leverage so much and the deal will be safer.
Love it. One thing I've heard you speak on before as well is talking about, especially for the newbie, talking about saving money versus raising money and that
Yeah.
hurdle of getting into real estate for the first time. Can you maybe break that down for our audience as well?
Yeah. So like I like to ask people this question, like what's faster, saving $1 million or raising $1 million, right? And the answer is obvious, raising $1 million, because some people have never saved $1 million. I don't even think I've saved $1 million to be honest, right? But raising $1 million way faster. And here's the thing that people forget about. Our life is not infinite. Okay. And so since our life is not infinite, it's important that we figure out how to get rich fast, or at least financially free fast, so that we can actually enjoy this thing that we call life. Like you look relatively young, I look relatively young. How about we go and use this youth in our life? Like, let's go do something with it while we still can, because you at whatever age you are now versus you at 75 are going to be two different people. You're not going to want to do things as much as you want to right now. So raise the $1 million versus save the $1 million so that you can buy more assets, so that you can create more cash flow, so that you can become financially free faster, so that you can do the things that you want to do while you still have the youth. Ta-da, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's that time freedom for me that drives me. I've 32 with 3 kids, so for sure, want to spend as much time as possible with the kiddos.
Yeah. So, hey, man, 32 is a fantastic age. And then you at 32 is very different than you at 72, right?
Yeah,
People think like when you go on vacations that all you need is time and money, but that's not true. You need time, money, and health. Because if you booked yourself a snowboarding trip, but your knees no longer work the way they did and they hurt all of the time, how much are you going to want to snowboard? Not so much, right? So some people book all of these vacations and trips and like they're just putting off for some time in the future that even when it eventually comes, it's not going to be like what you pictured. And now you messed up because you can't rewind the clock. And that's the unfortunate thing. So raise money. Now, I guess I want to dive deeper into the newbie kind of thing, right? Raising money.
Mhm.
Okay, Hoan, you say raising money. So matter of factly, how do we do it? Well, there's a bunch of different ways. But the most important thing that you have to remember is that you have to constantly ask yourself when you're trying to raise money, what's in it for them? Okay. What is in it for them? And you have to think from their point of view. When you're asking them for money, what are they thinking of you? Are they like, is this guy going to steal my money? Is he going to run off into the sunset and I never see him again? Right. What you want to do is you want to create this brand, this reputation of you're somebody who has good opportunities for other people to invest in, and that you always do what you say you're going to do, and that you're always in communication with the people that you're working with, and you're just that guy that people want to come to. When it comes to real estate investing or anything like that, you want your name to be top of mind for other people. And so that's going to take a while. So if you're a newbie and you're like, Hoan, how do I do that without reputation? And how do I do that without experience? How do I do all that kind of stuff? Do what you can. Okay. Do what you can. And what does that mean? Well, maybe you go out and you learn from this podcast and you're like, wow, I learned a lot from Hoan. And then you go on my YouTube channel and then you learn a whole bunch of stuff. And then what you do is you share all of the things that you've been learning, and you do this week after week after week. And you go, hey, I learned about debt service coverage ratio. Hey, I learned about apartment investing. Hey, I learned about fix and flips, Airbnbs, whatever. And you just keep talking about it. The people who are working their 9 to 5, they're not in the industry. They don't know lingo and jargon and all that kind of stuff. And if you're the only one on their timeline who's saying it, then you're the guy. You're the guy. When they think real estate, they think Matt, they think Hoan, they think whoever, right? You're the guy because you're doing what you can. Don't let the things you haven't done or can't do stop you from doing what you can do. You can build your relationships. You can build your reputation. You can build your credibility in a million different ways. Figure out how you can. And so you're listening to this and you're like, I don't know how. I go, pretend like you did know how. What would you say? Okay, then do that. Good enough. Start there, right? And just keep growing from there.
Yeah, I love that mindset, man. That's a great way to think about it. I'm fired up now too.
Go do what you can, Matt. No, I'm kidding.
One concept. So speaking on the raising money side as well, one concept that I think is super interesting that you've spoken on before is that whole infinite banking system, kind of using wholesale life insurance.
Yes.
Can you maybe speak to that and how that works and who that's for and
Yeah.
potential is there?
Yeah. I would say starting off, infinite banking using whole life policy is for someone with money, because all I want you to do is think about it as a high yield savings account with a bunch of other safety factors in place. So what I do with my own personal whole life insurance policy is when I pay for the policy every single year, some of the money goes into my death benefit insurance. Like everybody understands, when I die, my spouse or heir, who's ever, they get paid off, right? So when I pay $1, some of that dollar goes into paying for that death benefit, and some of it goes into that high yield savings account that I was talking about. That's what we call the cash value. And what I do as an infinite banking practitioner, licensed insurance broker, I set up the plan where when you give me $1, most of it goes into the cash value bucket. So now for a policy holder, right, I put the dollar in, some goes that way, some goes that way. So the money that goes into the cash value part, I can use that for deals later on. It is just a savings vehicle that grows at a higher rate than most savings accounts. And it's a safe place to put the money, because depending on the state that you're in, let's say I were to get sued, I can throw my hands up and go, whoa, that money, that's not my money. That's the insurance company's money, not mine. I don't know what you're talking about. Protect it from litigation, right? And then if something were to happen to me in the meantime, from now until 100 years old and I pass away, the death benefit covers everybody that I love, right? So it's like these two-pronged protection approach, but also the money in the cash value is sitting there growing. And when I need it, I can reach in there and I can take a policy loan against the cash value. And then I go use that money and I go buy a real estate property. Maybe I do a BRRRR strategy. Maybe I flip it. And then I get that money back. Remember, we talked about this. This is the velocity of money. I put money in the deal. I want my money back. So I take my cash value. I take my cash value loan. I take that. I put it into the deal. And then once I finish the deal, I refinance or sell it. I get my money back and I pay back my cash value loan. And so that loan, that bucket of money is whole and complete. But here's the cool part. When I took the money out, it wasn't from the bucket, actually. It was a loan against the bucket, meaning the money that I have in my cash value is still the whole entire thing. Imagine I had $1 million in it, but I needed to borrow $400,000. Well, most people would think there's only $600,000 left in the bucket. Not true. The insurance company is giving me a loan for $400,000. There's still $1 million in the bucket, growing at whatever interest rate it's growing at. So it's the full million, not $600,000. But I get to access that $400,000 I need to go buy my real estate deal, do my deal, get my money back, pay off the loan from the insurance company. So it's a really cool thing. I got all my money growing in that, and then I can still use that money to go do my deals. So it's a kind of a complex thing, but not really when you think about it. And if you guys are listening to this, just listen to it again, and you're like, I got it. It's easy. Hoan's the smartest guy in the world. Nobody's ever explained it so well. it, it's not
Yeah,
bad.
yeah, creative finance in general, and really like this approach of how to access money like that. It's something we hear more and more and more in this market, in terms of interest and people trying to put in a little bit of research to figure out. So appreciate you breaking that down. You are really good at breaking things down like that, man. So
Yeah.
I know you've got. I mean, you have the YouTube channel, you have your coaching going on.
Yep.
Can you maybe talk about what you're working on the education side, why you got into it, and maybe even more on like what makes your approach unique as well, within that world?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because truth be told, and don't tell anybody that I'm telling you this, but I don't really like real estate. I like education though. I love teaching it, right? I love teaching it. So 11 years ago when I became a real estate investor, I thought, wow, this is really cool. I didn't know you can do that with money. I didn't know that's how it worked when you buy real estate. And then uh, I just talk about all of the cool things that you can do on social media just for fun. And then people would reach out to me like, oh, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Like, can you show me? And then eventually, like, I'm like, yeah, I can show you. And then I start showing people, and then people keep reaching out to me, and they're like, Hone, can you coach me? Can you mentor me? Can you this, that, the other, right? And then eventually, like, I was like, okay, I need to create a formal education program. So I've been educating people for years. Now I have a program where I run 2 Zooms a week for my students, Monday and Wednesday. Now, if you're listening to this and this is a recording, that could have changed. Who knows what it is like 10 years from now? But as of right now, I'm running 2 Zooms a week because I love it. And I'm showing them everything that I know, right? I'm showing them how I raise money, how I analyze deals, how I talk to contractors, just you name it. I go through it, open book, right? And I teach them everything from single family Burr strategy to how to do syndications and everything in between. And so you get a full like gamut of education. So that's what I do personally for my students. In addition to that, what was so interesting, other investors have noticed my education business and style and everything else. And they're like, Hone, can you help me build an education platform? And so now I'm helping other coaches build their education platforms out. And so my thoughts are that Hone Zone is going to evolve into a like a coaching business for a bunch of people who are really great in the industry. And the cool part is I'm getting to vet who I want to work with, right? I don't just say yes just because they're like, Hone, can you help me? It's like I get to work with the best of the best. And that's really cool.
That's
That's
awesome.
really cool because I'm learning from them. At the same time, I'm building out their platform based on what I know students want and need, right? And I've been doing this for years. And why people like learning from me is just like what you've noticed in this call. The way I break things down, I make it so easy. And I'm really personable because I'm not all this like uptight professional suit and tie kind of guy. I'm just like a regular guy. And you really feel like you can talk to me. And when your guard is down and you're really open minded and you feel like you're just talking to a friend, the education really seeps in, and that's all I'm looking for because I really care about the education part. I love that part. I'm in a community called GoBundance right now, and I have accountability partners in that. And I was telling my accountability partners, I was like, hey guys, so like here's something funny. I don't really like real estate so much, but I like the education part. And they go, Hone, when I watch a football game, I don't expect the coach to be on the field. You don't necessarily have to invest in real estate if what you want to do and what you're great at is the education. Like the best coach in football, basketball, baseball, whatever, right? You're not expecting them to be on the field. You're expecting them to do what they're great at, right? And a great coach brings the best out of people. That's why I was just watching a thing with Shaquille O'Neal, and they didn't win a championship until they put the right coach in, right? And that was all the difference, right? Shaquille O'Neal was the same player as he always was, but with the right coach, he started winning the rings. So that was an eye opener for me because sometimes I was like, okay, I'm just going to invest in real estate because I have to continue to have credibility. It's like they were looking at me like, Hone, you have so much credibility already. You don't need to prove anything to anybody. Just do what you're doing and continue to coach if you love that.
Yeah, I love it, man. This has been great. What is the best way for people to get in contact with you too and get involved with you and all that?
Yeah. So people can reach out to me. My email address is hone@honezone.com, right? Hone@honezone.com. They can check me out. Hone Zone is my handles for everything: YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, you name it. And my website is honezone.com. So those are all the different ways you guys can reach out to me.
There we go. Yeah, we'll link to that. I know we'll also link in the description here. We've got some free resources on our end, like the Scaling Your Real Estate Investing ebook and things like that. But yeah, really appreciate the time, man. You again, you're great at breaking things down like that. So our audience will really like this one.
Yeah. I hope so. I hope so. I hope they learned something, and I hope that they actually got the fire in their bellies to say like, yeah, I don't like my boss. I don't like my job, and it's okay. What I want people to know is that you guys have permission to create the life that you actually want. You don't have to stay in your job just because you got your degrees. Yes, you're going to feel like you wasted the money. So what? You're going to feel like you wasted your life if you're 70 years old looking back. So just make the move. Be courageous. Be bold. Go take those actions because it's worth it. Because you got this one life, and if you mess it up, you can't do it again. Unless you believe in some kind of religion that says that you get reborn and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm not that smart.
Well, I think you've got me fired up. We got our audience fired up. So thanks again, man. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, of course, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and to everyone watching, this is Matt Camp with Deal Machine, and happy deal finding.
See you guys.